Hi, I'm Sherry Kendall, and welcome to Hometown Salutes. Today, I have Fayette County veteran Joe Becker. Welcome, Joe, to the show.
Thank you.
So let's get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and were you born and raised here in Connersville?
I was born in Oxford, Ohio, but my family did live here, and I'm a lifelong member of Connersville.
Okay, so you graduated from Connersville High School?
My father moved away to California my last 2 years of high school, so I did not graduate from Connersville, but I stayed out there for just a little bit, and then I returned home.
Okay. So what branch of service were you in?
I was in the Air Force.
And why did you pick the Air Force?
After discussing it with my family, my parents, my brother, uncles, grandfather, I was kind of looking the Army or the Navy, and then the Air Force kind of got brought up, and I started looking into it, and it just seemed like at my age I joined a little later than traditional. Most guys go in 18, 19 years old, the majority anyway, and I joined at 23. So the Air Force just seemed like the best fit for me, the way they do things. And
so when did you enlist then? You were 23?
I was 23. It would have been 2010.
And so what made you? I mean, what made you think to do that? And
after high school, I'd gotten married at 22, and just looking for something steady career-wise and all that, and I'd never really considered the military at first. That's probably why I didn't join so early. But afterwards, I realized it might be a really good fit for me, at least to get me started in life. And so that's when I started looking into it.
Did you come from a military family?
I did. My grandfather is a Korean War vet in the Navy. I have one uncle that was Army. My father was Air Force. I had a brother who served in the Marines. Or two brothers, I'm sorry, a brother-in-law, and then I have another brother-in-law that was the Army. So I have quite a few members of my family that were prior military.
Right. So you said that you were married when you enlisted?
I was.
Okay. So was your wife supportive about that, and how were your parents?
After a long discussion at that time, she was. My mother was a little bit more hesitant, given the fact that it was wartime when I had joined. My father was very, very supportive and very proud.
Yeah.
So, and I think probably the Air Force had something to do with that too, with him being prior Air Force. So. Yeah,
well, that's awesome. So basic training. So your first day, you take off. Well, where are you going for basic training?
Started off in Indianapolis from Indianapolis MEPS station. Flew out of Indianapolis. I had a layover in Dallas, which seems like no big deal, but whenever you're heading to something like basic training, and then you have that time where you're stopped, and it just gives you that much more time where you have to sit on it and dwell that you're going to basic training. And basic training can be fun in some ways, but it can be not fun in a lot of ways too. And then from there we went from I believe it was Dallas, Fort Worth. Houston. I'm sorry, Houston. We stopped at layover Houston, and then on to San Antonio, where all Air Force, as far as I know, I don't think they've changed it. All basic trainees go to San Antonio for Air Force.
So how long is basic training?
At the time I went through, it was 8 weeks. That's a long 8 weeks. It doesn't sound like that long. I know that other services, other branches, basic training is actually can be significantly longer. I don't know exactly what the time frames they are, but I always tell everybody that the Air Force, it's like, well, we just have to learn everything faster. So,
yeah, there you go. So anything memorable in basic training, or a funny story that you could share?
There's probably lots of them that I'm not going to remember the exact details of all of them. But as anybody who served in the military knows, that the drill sergeants, they can say some pretty funny stuff. Some things I probably won't repeat here.
Yeah.
But one of the funnier things I think is whenever you first get there, is just watching everybody and yourself trying to learn to march and formation, and just some of the some of the goofier things that happen and tripping over each other's feet and all that. But it's really rewarding and cool to see the whole team go from not being able to do this day one to progressing by day, our week 8, and graduating and stuff. That's just like a fine oiled machine. Like it's every step is
What you all
perfect.
become.
Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. So during basic training, is that when you get to pick what specialized training you're in during that?
Some will, because some will just go in like open general on their contracts, and I always say those are the guys who just want to be there, and they'll kind of let their aptitude test decide for them usually. Me, I actually originally wanted to be something aircraft mechanic, something like that. And that's another reason that led me to the Air Force. I was thinking newest airframes, that sort of thing, the newest technology. And then when I got to MEPS, I had scored significant enough in the area of mechanics to do that. But the problem was I didn't realize that I was colorblind. So I'm not, to some extent, I know that some suffer with, but my color vision is off, apparently. I didn't know. And that's a big no-no. You can't, go work on wires or anything like that in an airframe and get the wires crossed, because that could be disastrous. So I wound up going into more of a human resource role, more of a personnel role. And it was rewarding, though, because I wanted something that was going to train me for the outside world. And that really just prepared me for leadership and all those things.
So where did you have that done at? Like basic training was in Texas. So where did you go?
Basic training was San Antonio for 8 weeks. And then I had to go to Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi, which is just outside of Biloxi, I believe, if I remember correctly. And I was actually there during the Gulf oil spill. So I got to see the Gulf of Mexico and the oil moving in and all that stuff. And we kind of watched that intently while I was during my stay there. That was when you initially go to your specialty training, at least for the Air Force. I can't speak on the other branches. It's almost like a downgraded version of basic training. So your training's not over yet, and there's still those instructors there that can be intense when they need to be, because I think they find that if they just let the reins loose, that some of them may just I don't want to say go wild, but the freedom of being out of basic training might get to them a little bit. But so they keep the reins on you a little bit while you're there. And I wound up actually getting a holdover while I was there. So it was an extra 3 weeks I was there waiting to actually get into course, because they just had a large influx of people into that career field at the time. So that kind of stunk a little bit. So if anybody that's in the military knows, whenever you're on holdover and you don't really have any assignment or courses or classes to do, the joke is you're usually doing weeds and seeds. So you're pulling weeds, picking trash, putting down seeds, doing anything that they just need done around the base to help keep the base nice and all that, which that's okay.
Right.
It's not bad work. It's just kind of like doing landscaping, or they may have you clean the barracks or any kind of housing, or you might go help work in the chow hall or something like that. But
did you get along with all your instructors?
I did. I did. They're there as your instructors, and their leadership in the Air Force is phenomenal. Every leader, I can honestly say every leader I had was really, really good. And I call them leaders because that's what they are. They're leading you down the path to be the best that you can be. And with that, you don't really necessarily get along with them because they're not in that role to get along with you. They're in that role to lead you and to guide you. And then towards the end, like maybe the last couple of days after, you've pretty much officially graduated and all those things, they can kind of take that hat off, so to speak, and they'll talk to you in more of a just regular conversation. And it was really neat to see the change in them too, and just what good guys they are and gals, and they have families just like you and stuff, and it makes you remember, oh yeah, they're just a person.
Just like, yep.
Yep. But they're just there, and they've reached that peak of where they're at, because that's a really hard thing to do and a really hard thing to get into is instructing and drill sergeant and all that stuff, because they have to be precise and awesome at everything that they do. The uniforms are always perfect, and
right.
So
Right. So how many tours did you do?
Just one.
And where was that?
Afghanistan.
Oh wow. So what year is that?
I left the States in 2012, I believe October or November of 2012. Don't quote me on the exact dates because I don't remember.
So that's right during. We're in war at that time.
We sure are. It was I was there for just over 6 months, just shy of 7 months. In country at, of course, here lately in the news, everybody's heard of Bagram Air Force Base, or Air Base. That's where I was at. I was stationed for my time there. I was on Bagram Air Base, which I don't think people, obviously that have never been there would understand the sheer size of that air base. It's for an air base, it's huge, especially in country like that. And there's all different types of military service when I was there, from all over the world that were there with us, and it was really awesome to see and to serve with those people, and you get to learn a little bit about them and their military and see their equipment, and it can be scary knowing that you're going to a place like that, especially that we're at war, but it was really, really rewarding. It's a time in my life that I'll always remember. Probably one of the more memorable times in my life, obviously. But I learned a lot. I learned, you learn everything from coping skills. When people say they're away from home, it's pretty hard to be that much further away from home than the other side of the globe. So,
had you ever been out of the country like that before?
Never. I'd never left the United States. I'd seen a lot of states, and I'd traveled a lot growing up, and during the Air Force, I'd going to different trainings and stuff. I'd seen different places, but nothing ever like that. That was a totally different train, totally different. It was a culture shock, for sure.
So what, do they have seasons? Like, what is the weather like there? Do they?
Everybody always assumes, I guess, because you hear a lot about Iraq, which I'd never been. I'd been to Kuwait, just in a quick stop. So I got to see that a little bit. And I assume, everybody said that they're kind of the same. Everybody assumes that it's this big, flat, tan, hot desert like Iraq.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's actually very, very, very mountainous. It's very dusty. It's for having seasons, there's a large portion of it that seems very dry, but then you have a lot of green. The mountains that were around Bagram it seemed like they were snow-capped the entire time I was there. It's one of the taller mountain ranges in the world, right through there. So I had seen the Rockies, and I had seen the Grand Tetons, which were obviously huge and beautiful, but these things were just a whole nother level of mountains. They were monstrous. It was really beautiful to see, though.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
I'm sorry, you asked about the seasons. The winters are very cold, very harsh. The summers are very hot. It's from one extreme to the other, and then your springs and falls. What little bit of fall I seen seemed like your typical fall, starting to get a little colder. We had snowfall quite a bit there. Of course, being around the mountains and stuff, and we were already at an extremely high sea level, much more than we are here in Connersville. So
Yeah. So what's a work day like for you? Do you get to start when and how long? And
stateside or over
there.
I actually wound up. I worked in an office a lot of the time into what we call the PAX terminal, where incoming and outgoing troops would come through. My job while I was there was helping to maintain where everybody was at, and know where everybody's at, and have a file of where every Air Force member was at in that region of Afghanistan. So if they needed to be contacted, or leadership needed to know where this person or that person was at, we would locate them for them. Also, anybody coming in, upper ranks all the way to the bottom ranks, would come in, and I was part of a team that would give a briefing. You would give just local briefings about everything that's going on currently in that area, what to expect, where things are while they're there, help them getting set up for bunk that night, all of those things. So I got to meet a lot of people in a lot of different branches. So
You had mentioned that you were over there like during Christmas time.
I was over there. A couple of things I guess I could remember about being over there. Thanksgiving, Christmas.
What's the morale like among all of you during that time? I mean, it
You
has to
can
be
tell that there
hard.
may be, it can be a little hard, especially for some members. Those with family, like me, I had a wife and child at home. That can be really hard. You miss your kids, and stuff. But the technology, luckily, while I was there, I know that early on it must have been much worse. But the technology allowed us to be able to speak with our families a lot more often than they probably were able to before. And for those guys that were out on, isolated fobs and stuff, it was probably a lot worse for them. So I didn't have it too bad. But the morale could be up and down a little bit. But that's only just general feeling, They don't want to be there. They're happy to be there, and they're happy to serve and not want, But they, a lot of them miss their families, I'm sure,
Yeah.
But nobody really ever expressed it because I don't think they ever wanted to bring each other down.
Right.
So.
Right. So is there any story or something funny or an experience that happened while you were over there?
There was a lot of good times with the people that I got to meet and work with. There's a lot of other things that were not so fun. Being that it was a big air base and stuff, they would like to they would like to lob in rockets into the base and stuff like that, which can be scary when you hear the big siren come off. But they have different technology and stuff that would pick it up, or as it was coming in and stuff, and it would sound kind of sound the alarm, so to speak, and you would just take shelter or what have you, and that can be scary. There's I've had them impact close enough to where if you're down on the ground, you can feel it hitting through the ground. You know what I mean? Luckily, a lot of them were duds, so they didn't exactly explode, but they would hit so hard that they would shrapnel out, and that was the real danger, because they could throw chunks, through concrete walls, no problem, and stuff. So it could be really scary.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of good times. There was a lot of rewarding times, and there was a lot of sad times. So.
Did you have to stay on base the whole time? Like, could you?
I was
off?
lucky enough that you stay on base unless you're assigned to go do something outside of base. As far as I could remember and understand, you weren't leaving base because there was so much to do there to keep all the operations running. So I was lucky in that aspect, I guess.
So are you glad that you joined the service?
I am very, very glad.
Is there any life lessons that you learned from your time in the military?
Oh, a bunch.
Grew up fast.
Yeah, you grow up really fast, and it's.
Yeah.
You watch all the guys that were, of course, that were younger than me. They grew up really fast. You see where they start out and where they, you work with them on a base or something for 2 or 3 years, stationed with them, and you watch them grow, and then they move on to either, deploy or go to different bases and stuff like that. Life lessons. I think one of the biggest things is, just all the training that I got to go through. I could bore you with all of it. I could tell you a little bit about it all. There's a lot of just your typical military training. But I think one of the most rewarding things that I got out of it was leadership NCO Academy. While I was there, I was stationed at Langley Air Force Base most of my time in. So it was really rewarding and really eye-opening to see that, and then it's a big life lesson.
Yeah.
So
when your time was up, you said 6 years, is that right?
Yeah, I was in for probably just over about 6.5, I think, right about 6.5.
So I'm sure they probably tried to get you to re-sign, and were you just ready to go?
I had actually already started, I knew that I was probably going to separate, and I had already started the process of trying to move on to my next career, which wound up being law enforcement. I wound up going out I actually had filled out applications for the Connersville Police Department and the Fayette County Sheriff's Department at the same time, because they both happened to be hiring at that time. The Sheriff's Department's process just kind of happened to go a little quicker, so I was lucky enough, and the current sheriff, Joey Laughlin, was gracious enough to bring me on and give me a chance. So for that, I'm always going to be very thankful to him for that.
Yeah.
And I had wound up moving on after that pretty quick, going back up north, where my wife is from in Huntington. And stayed around there, but then got a call from a local officer here about a year later at the city, and they were looking to fill a spot and asked if I'd be interested in coming back.
Oh, wow.
And I was excited about that because that's where my father actually served as a police officer on Connersville for many years, from '86 to I believe '96, '98, something like that.
Oh, he did? Yeah.
He did. And so that was really cool. And of course, my brother was already a sheriff's deputy prior to me starting there. So it was really fun that I get to work where my dad worked, and there for a while I got to work with my brother. And then here recently, I actually just made the switch back to the sheriff's department. They had an opening, and after a long discussion with my wife and talking with the sheriff, he was once again gracious enough to give me a chance to come back, and I've loved it and enjoyed it ever since, and that's where my heart was. So.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your family.
I have 5 children. I actually, my first child is from a previous marriage. She lives with her mother in Lafayette. I'm currently married to my beautiful wife, Kayla. We have 4 children together, so I have 5 children total. She's from Huntington. We live just on the edge of the city limits here. We love it. And we have 1 out of our 4, and it goes to Frazee.
Okay.
That's where she's currently at right now with the Halloween and all that stuff. And you got to meet my little ones that I had to bring here, so.
That's awesome. So is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you'd like to say before we wrap things up?
I just want to say that as a law enforcement and stuff, the community here, we as law enforcement in this community are very, very lucky to have a large support of the local population, and I just wanted to say that it's really, really appreciated. It means a lot. I have people coming up to me all the time thanking me for what I do, and it's really, really nice to get a reminder of that you are appreciated.
Right.
And,
You don't see that on the news.
No, you
You see the
unfortunately
bad
don't.
parts.
Yeah, you only see the bad. That's kind of the common theme, is only the bad things that happen. And every once in a while you'll get a little star there, but
Right.
so it's good to know that our community understands what we do and what some things that we have to go through and
Right.
see, and so
Yep. We have a great community, that's for sure.
we do.
Well, Joe, I want to thank you for sharing your experience with us today.
I appreciate you having me.
I appreciate and thank you so much for your service and your sacrifice.
Thank you.
So be sure to tune in next month for another edition of Hometown Salutes.